Welcome everyone to our MSCC technical webinar. This is actually the second session in this series. We're pleased to have our colleagues over at Jetstream2 present to us today. But before we get started, I just want to again reiterate our session today is on getting started with Jetstream2, cloud computing for everyone. So just starting with some introductions of our wonderful presenters today. We first have Jenn Armstrong, who's a part of the Research Cloud Services at Indiana University. A little bit about Jenn. Jenn entered the wide world of research computing in 2023 after spending most of her career working in marketing and communications. Her role on the Jetstream2 team is largely focused on allocating resources to new and existing users, as well as providing support to the Jetstream2 community. No 2 days are ever the same. She lives in Bloomington, Indiana with her family. We are also joined by Caleb Bright-Hughes, who's also of the Research Cloud Services at Indiana University. After completing a doctoral degree in physics, Caleb joined the research computing community at Indiana University in 2024. His work on Jetstream2 includes improving documentation, familiarizing new users with Jetstream2 in cloud computing, and troubleshooting errors for advanced use cases. He lives in Martinsville, Indiana, with his wife and their pets, and dedicates his free time to coaching academic programs at the local high school. So, with that, I think we'll jump back. And actually, I will allow our panelists to take the floor. So I'll stop sharing and pass it over to them.
All right. And I will go ahead and start sharing. Oh, wait, I have to request to share.
Okay.
Please send request.
There we are.
All
I'm
right.
going to spotlight you both as well.
Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. So welcome to Getting Started with Jetstream 2. My name is Jenn Armstrong, and I am here today with my fellow Jetstream 2 colleague, Caleb. Um, as Jessica said, we're from the Indiana University Research Cloud Services team. And our team provides support, outreach, and training for Jetstream 2. So whether you are just exploring resources or you're new to Jetstream 2 or you've been around for a while, but maybe you still have some questions. I did recognize some of the names of the people who had signed up today. So I think we might have kind of a mixture of all of those. But we're glad you're joining us today and wanting to learn more about Jetstream 2. So I am going to go over just some background info about Jetstream 2 and the Access ecosystem. And then Caleb will lead the tutorial, and then I'll kind of wrap things up at the end. So before we dive in, just a couple of notes. So I did have a link to our slides. I've got some links and URLs kind of in the presentation. So feel free to get that now. We can also make sure that that's available later. But if you want to follow along or just use the links, they're all there. And if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat and Q&A. I will try to monitor things while presenting, although it's kind of hard to do both. So feel free to interrupt me with questions if you have them, or Caleb as well. And then finally, during registration for this event, you were asked to provide an access ID if you had one, and that just enables you to participate in the tutorial portion. And if you didn't do that during registration, that's okay. It just means that you can't kind of follow along live, but you absolutely can do this later. And you're more welcome to stick around, watch, take notes, and then try the steps on your own later. All right, so let's get started. So first, just a little bit about Jetstream 2. Jetstream 2 is a flexible, user-friendly cloud computing resource environment that has a wide variety of use cases, from the lab to the classroom and beyond that. Uh, so there can often be barriers to entry when it comes to cyber infrastructure and computing resources. First and foremost, not every institution has them. Uh, Cyber infrastructure is expensive to establish and maintain. And even when you do have access to them, traditional HPC resources can be kind of esoteric and maybe a little overwhelming for inexperienced users. They can also come with a lot of time and waiting and usage restrictions. So then you consider cloud computing, which means resources are more readily available and scalable. and they don't have the hardware costs, but commercial cloud environments like AWS still come with a price tag, and that really still limits their availability. So that's where we come in. So Jetstream2 is a resource provider for the NSF's Advanced Cyber Infrastructure Coordination Ecosystem Services and Support, or ACCESS, program. And the primary goal of this program, of the ACCESS program, is to help broaden and democratize access to cyber infrastructure. And as a resource provider and as a program, so we believe that scientists and researchers should be able to use the latest technologies to advance their work, and that allows them to be on the forefront of scientific discovery. We want educators to have access to powerful computing resources so that they can train the next generation. And then for their students, we want to facilitate practical, hands-on experience with tools that are relevant to their fields of study, and regardless of whether their home institution can afford to provide them to them. So as a resource provider for access, we can do this and more by offering access to Jetstream2 at no cost. We're also a resource provider for the National Artificial Intelligence Research Resource, NARE. We love our acronyms. The NARE pilot program, which is a separate program, and some of you might be familiar with it. And there's some similarities between NARE and Access. Today we're going to focus on Access, but I'm happy to answer any questions about either program. If you have those, we can do those offline later if you'd like. But I am, very familiar with both. So um, we'll stick with Access for today. So when we talk about Jetstream2 resources, what does that actually mean? So Jetstream2 is actually four separate resources. So we have our standard compute CPU nodes, and then we have large memory, we have GPU resources, and we have storage. So they're all kind of considered four, interlocking, but four separate resources. With Jetstream2, because we are a cloud computing environment, you create and launch your own virtual machines or instances, is what we refer to them as, that you then manage. And these instances come in a variety of sizes and configurations. We call them flavors. And you can see a full list of sizes and capabilities at that link in the corner. This is just a link to our documentation site. So Jetstream2 users are provisioned with a terabyte of storage by default, and you can request more. There are some limits, but more storage is possible should you need it. And I'll talk about that here in just a second. So Jetstream2 resources are finite. While we are not a traditional batch scheduled HPC system, there's a limited number of each type, flavor of instance that's available to the community at any given time. So in general, we ask that our users just kind of, be good stewards of their resources. When you are done with an instance, shelving it or deleting it, I'll come back to that shelving term here in a minute, but just kind of keeping in mind that there is a community pool of resources. And if you are occupying an instance of a certain flavor, that means that is one removed from the pool that's available to everybody else. So now let's talk about why someone would want to use Jetstream2. So in addition to the fact that these resources are, free, Jetstream2 users do have a significant amount of freedom and control. So as I mentioned before, with Jetstream2, you'll create your own individual instances from a variety of flavors and capabilities, but then you also have full admin access to those instances. So then you can configure them however you want and install, whatever software you have licenses to. And then instances that are built from one of our featured images, and images kind of like a template, those instances automatically have access to our software collection. And that includes popular things like RStudio, MATLAB, others. There's a whole list of what is possible to use from the collection. So as a cloud computing environment, Jetstream2 is available on demand. This means that if for some reason you need to get into your instance or launch a new instance at 3 in the morning, I hope you don't have to, but you can do that. Each allocation has guardrails kind of in the form of quotas. So kind of quotas, cores, RAM, number of instances. And those quotas can be flexible. But as long as you are within your quotas, you can spin up an instance as long as one's available. And when we say on demand, we pretty much mean that. There are scheduled monthly maintenance windows and the occasional, very unfortunate unplanned outage. But we have a team of engineers who try to keep those downtimes to an absolute minimum. Um, we'll go over this more in the tutorial, but I have a note here about shelving and unshelving, and I cannot stress enough that these are extremely important terms. So what this means, when you launch your instance and it becomes active, it's in a state that we call unshelved. It will stay in this state whether or not you are actively using it, whether or not you're doing any work on it, running any processes. If it is active, it is unshelved. And this means that it's consuming resources. It's reserving that instance just for you from the community pool. So it is extremely important to shelve your instance when you're done using it. Unless you need the instance to be persistently running, if it was running a server or a site, you'll want to shelve that instance. So Jetstream2 instances do have full internet access and persistent IPs, which makes them great for hosting a website or a science gateway, database, file server, things like that. So who does Jetstream2 serve? So I wanted to talk just a little bit about who we serve because I think it really speaks to the flexibility of our resources. So these are some numbers from 3 months ago, but right now we have just under 4,000 active users. But since the beginning of the project, we've had over 10,000 users. A little close to like 2,000 right now are students, but we've had almost 4,000 student users since the beginning of the project. Um, and we serve users from across the country, from 73 domains of science, all sorts of areas of technology, all sorts of backgrounds. We've got users who are seasoned software engineers, researchers, professors, TAs, grad students, undergrads. That's, over 10,000 users directly since the beginning of the project. And we are the one thing that they all have in common, and I think I can speak for our whole team when I say this, is that like this is what makes our work feel really special. We are leveling the playing field when it comes to providing access to these resources. And in this way, we're contributing to the advancement of science and education. And I think that's something that we all feel really strongly about. So I really like to see this snapshot of our community and think about that. Okay, so back to using Jetstream 2. So we'll talk just a little bit about how someone can use Jetstream 2. I think the question is, how do they want to use Jetstream 2? So, we have that whole spectrum of users, but largely they can be organized into a couple of different use cases. So a really big percentage of Jetstream 2 projects serve this sort of instructional purpose. They're used in a class, in a classroom context. Through Jetstream 2, students have access to computing and analysis tools, regardless of the power of their personal device or their university provided device. If they can get online, they can use Jetstream 2. Um, with these tools, they get very valuable hands-on experience in the fields that they're studying. Um, so outside the classroom, we have users who are developers and engineers, and they can work on their code with, GUI apps. They can also use GPUs to create and train machine learning and large language models. That's a use case that, understandably, we are getting only increasing demand for. And another large area of users that we serve want to share their data and their applications with students, colleagues, communities. And so with full internet access and persistent IPs, like I said, Jetstream 2 is great for hosting databases, file servers, and websites, as well as science gateways, which are, if you're not familiar with that term, it's a community developed set of tools that are integrated into like a web portal, or like various applications, all kind of integrated into this web facing interface, or this web interface. So through the interface, users then access and use the tools through the gateways themselves, which lowers the barrier. Whoops, sorry, lost my spot. Lowers the barrier to the resources. So with Science Gateways, we're serving over 200,000 users, and I would say most of them do not even know that they're using Jetstream 2. So interacting with Jetstream 2. So when it comes to using Jetstream 2, our users have a few different options. We offer three different graphic user interfaces. Exosphere, which is what we're going to show today, this is our most commonly used interface. I would say it's somewhere like high 90 some percent of users, like they have only ever used Exosphere. The most commonly used one, that's the one we'll be using today. There's also Horizon, and that is the default OpenStack dashboard. OpenStack is the infrastructure that Jetstream2 is built on. It's slightly less pretty, but it does offer some more tools, more functionality, as it's just kind of a little closer to the machine. So different, you can still do everything you would need to in that interface. It's just kind of a different world. And then there's Cacao, which was developed by and is maintained by an entity called Cyverse, which is at the University of Arizona. And Cacao is it's useful for some more advanced and kind of specific use cases, such as building clusters. Um, all of these interfaces offer some common features and common actions for interacting with Jetstream2. So creating your instance, shelving, deleting instances, managing and attaching storage. So similar actions can be done in all of these. But again, we will be showcasing Exosphere for this workshop. Exosphere also offers a means of accessing your instance through a web shell or a web desktop. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit in the tutorial. And then, of course, you also have the ability to SSH into your instances and interact with them via the command line if that's what you prefer to do. A bit about storage. So as I mentioned earlier, Jetstream2 does provide storage to our users. However, Jetstream2 is not primarily a storage or archival service, and it shouldn't be seen as this sort of like long-term solution. It's more of a temporary location for staging your data for compute. So users are given a terabyte of storage by default. And again, you can request more if you have justified need for it. As for storage options, the default and the most common method is volume storage, and that's a sort of mountable block storage, kind of like a flash drive. You attach it to your instance, you read and write the data, and then detach it from the instance when you're done. We also offer shared file systems. It's in the form of something called Manila shares, and that is OpenStack's shared file system, which means a Manila share can be accessed by multiple instances and users. And then finally, we have the object store, and this is a very advanced, like if it's something you need, you can reach out and let us know. But this functions like a bucket, and that's for storing very large amounts of data without a file system. And then while we're on the topic of storage, I did want to mention that Jetstream2 is currently not authorized for storing or using any classified information, any sort of protected data like HIPAA or FERPA, anything like that. Okay, so before you can ever log into or use Jetstream2, you have to be added to or have resources on an active allocation. These allocations are primarily awarded through the Access program, but as I mentioned, we're also a resource provider for NAIR. So NAIR, Access Allocation, these are your gateways into using Jetstream2 resources. So, we'll stick with the context of access, but if you are here today as part of a NAIR award, this information won't apply to you. NAIR has kind of its own separate environment for provisioning and different dashboard for managing resources. So, you can kind of ignore that, but maybe hang tight. You might want to apply for an access allocation in the future, so it could still be useful. So, as a resource provider for Access, all use of our resources begins with Access. Access used to be known as Exceed, which was established by the NSF to help researchers and educators utilize advanced computing systems. Access is best thought of as like an umbrella with many different resources under it, resource providers under it, such as Jetstream2. And then users access these different resources through allocations that are awarded by Access. When you have an allocation, you can be the PI. If you apply for the allocation, you are the PI. You can also have co-PIs, and then you can also just add users to use your allocation. That's more common for students or TAs. And then when you apply for the allocation. It's kind of like applying for a grant. You just provide some basic information. So if you have done this process before, you can just kind of tune this part out. But um, if you are still kind of exploring your options and you've never gone through this process before, these are kind of your first steps to take to get started with an access allocation. So the first thing you have to do is create an access ID. Not only will you use that to apply for resources, but that's how you will access the resources themselves. You will log in that way. Um, so then once you've got that access ID, you will do a little bit of research on what project type you are interested in based on your needs. So Access offers four different project tiers to choose from. There's Explore, which is the kind of entry level tier, easiest allocation type to get. There's Discover, which is the next level up. There's Accelerate and Maximize. Explore is that introductory level, and then the level, I'll say like the level of difficulty when applying for them, that makes it sound worse than it is. You just have to do a little bit more work to apply for these higher tiers, but you do receive more uh, computability. And I'll explain this here in just a second, but you get more for the effort that you put in if you want one of those higher tiers of project. So once you know what you want to apply for, you will prepare and submit your allocation request. And for the Explore level, again, that entry level tier, you provide, the title of your project, a very brief abstract, and some just a few other small details about you and what you plan to do. And the turnaround time for those in particular is really pretty short. Um, I mean, I would say most people who are applying for an Explorer hear back within a couple of business days. It For the higher tiers, they can take a little bit longer for those, but again, pretty quick turnaround time. So once you have your access allocation, you are awarded access credits. So depending on the level of your project, you then get a number of access credits that you kind of spend toward resources. It's kind of like, monopoly money that you are kind of spending on different resources like Jetstream2. So just a little bit about the allocations themselves. So allocations are requested by the PI of a project. The PI must be a US-based educator or researcher at a US-based academic, nonprofit research or educational institution. Like I mentioned, it's also possible to have co-PIs. Grad students are also eligible to apply. They are limited to, I think, Explore and Discover tiers, and they need a letter of collaboration from their advisor. Um, Allocations are renewed annually. Access will send reminder emails. They will let you know. Make sure you pay attention to those. We do see a lot of users who forget to renew or extend their project, and then they kind of temporarily get locked out of their resources. Um, and if that happens to you, don't panic. Your your data, your instances aren't going to go anywhere. If you are a week or even a month, uh, although I would encourage you not to wait a month. But your stuff isn't going to go anywhere if you forget to renew your project. But you will want to, if you want to continue using the resources, you'll want to get back on that as quickly as you can. Um, so an allocation's expiration date can also be extended, but that's only a good idea when you have credits remaining. Like if you haven't spent all of your credits, then you can request an extension. So you get more time, but not more credits. Renewal gives you a full renewal, so you get a whole other year and you get a new batch of credits to spend. And I think that can be a little tricky for people to understand sometimes, but I think that's the key point. Renewal, you get more credits. Extension, you get more time, but you don't get any more credits. And then projects can also be upgraded. So if you apply for an Explore project and you go through all of those credits that you've received and you still, you're still working and you need more credits, you can apply for the next level tier. So that would be the Discover tier. Um, so that is something that Access will let you do. You just kind of have to explain why you need to do that. Um, Access is actually pretty easy to work with. As long as you can justify your need and your use case, then they will be very willing to work with you. So as I mentioned, when your allocation is awarded, you are given these credits to spend. And these credits are exchanged toward, at least for Jetstream2, for compute time and storage. So the way that we have structured our resources credit consumption rates, it's one access credit equals one service unit or CPU hour. So all of our different instance flavors each consume SUs at a different rate. Um, so like a smaller CPU instance might only use, 2 to 4 SUs an hour, but a large memory instance or a larger GPU instance is going to have a higher consumption rate. We do have a chart in our documentation site that explains the consumption rates of all of our different instances. We also have this, I've linked it here on this slide, a usage estimation calculator, which is really handy. Like if you know what kind of instance you might want to use and then how often you're going to be using it, you can kind of estimate how many SUs you might need. So it's important to you don't have to be it doesn't have to be perfect estimation, but getting a ballpark is good, and monitoring your usage is really important. Um, so yeah, you can put in the work to kind of figure out what you might need. But there's some common usage scenarios listed on this slide. But you can also always ask us if you really are kind of lost and don't know what to expect. We're happy to help you with that. And then a quick word about NAIR. NAIR allocations are a little bit different. If you happen to be interested in applying for a NAIR allocation, those awards are given up front for a fixed number of SUs. So if you plan to apply for an air project and use Jetstream2, use that estimation calculator first when you're preparing your request, just to so you know kind of what to request. But again, I don't know if anybody's interested in applying for an air allocation, but that can be a handy tool as well. All right. A little bit more about credits. So after the allocation is rewarded, you get those credits to spend. And you do this in the form of something called a credit exchange. And you could submit as many credit exchanges as you need, though we do kind of recommend, fewer larger exchanges over lots of tiny little exchanges. You want to give yourself a couple of days for these to process, and then the credits become available to you in the form of SU service units on Jetstream2 resources. I mentioned this before, but it's really important to pay attention to your balances. You can do this through the Access Allocations dashboard or in our Exosphere user interface. We'll show that during the tutorial. And if you happen to run out of SUs, your access to Jetstream2 will be restricted, but don't panic. Like I've mentioned, your stuff isn't going to go anywhere. You'll just need to exchange some credits toward our resources to just kind of replenish that supply. And you can also always like reallocate credits and SUs between resources. So let's say you've allocated toward Jetstream2 CPU and GPU, but you find that you're not using one of those as much as you are the other, and you want to move them around, you can totally do that. And then one quick final note about credits and SUs. So these don't roll over year to year. So when if you do renew your allocation, like I said, you do get a fresh batch, but you don't get to bring along any that you maybe didn't use. So just something to keep in mind. Managing your users. So since you may not be working by yourself, it's very easy to add collaborators, students, someone else with an access ID to your Jetstream2 resources. So everyone who registered for this workshop and provided an access ID has been added to our training allocation. So valid access ID means you can be added to someone's resources. You want to make sure, just a quick note about access IDs, and you may have figured this out. You cannot use a personal email address. It has to be an institutional email address. And then with those user roles, the PI, co-PI, allocation manager, and user. Allocation manager is exactly what it sounds like. That means you can submit credit exchanges for an allocation. You can add users. The PI and the co-PI are just those are the ones who have their names associated with the project. Let's see, what else do I have here? Users must be added to resources. Ah, yes, users must be added, added to resources as well as the allocation. So I am going to show the allocations dashboard really quickly. And so here's the URL for that. It's the allocations.access-ci.org. And if you are part of multiple allocations, this is what you would see. They're all kind of like these expandable items here, but I'm going to show this one just to kind of show you what this looks like. So when you expand and see your allocation, you get an overview of, how many credits you have available, and what resources you have allocated them toward. Here's everyone who's part of the project. Here's all of your recent actions. So submitting exchanges and things. This is where you would go to actually exchange the resources under this credits and resources tab. The users and roles, this is everyone, this is adding people to the resources. And so you can see how all of these check boxes are clicked. If we unchecked some of these, that means, this user would still be part of the project, but they might not be able to actually use the resources themselves. There's a couple other tabs here for uploading publications, and then any sort of history of the allocation. So this is a very useful place to go. And this is kind of the source of truth for your usage. We will show usage in Exosphere, but it can get I think it's maybe 24 hours behind. It is not perfectly in sync with your actual usage. So if you don't know how many SUs you've used or how many SUs you have remaining, this is the place where you would go to see that. Okay, let me pull my notes back up. Okay. So as I mentioned before, you can log into Jetstream2. You have to have your own allocation or be added to somebody else's resources. So, if you gave us your ID whenever you registered for today's session, we have added you to that training allocation, which you will see here in just a moment. But if you are planning to follow along for the tutorial, I'm going to show you the process of actually getting to your allocation. So let me see. Did everybody? I want to make sure I'm not going too fast. This is the URL that you're going to go to get to Exosphere. So it's jetstream2.exosphere.app. And so when you first get to Exosphere, you will see a message saying that you are not logged into any allocations yet. And you will select the Add Allocation card. So then you'll pass through Access Login. You'll select Add Access Account. And then this is an important part. Make sure you leave this dropdown, this identity provider dropdown. Leave Access CI as the identity provider. There are some institutions listed in this dropdown, but those are not the methods you choose. We do see that people running into trouble with that. So make sure you leave this as Access CI, and then go ahead and log on. Enter your access credentials. And you may have to pass through Duo authentication. And then once you have passed through login, you will then see a screen with any allocations that you have been added to or that you have. So unless you already have, unless you're already using Jetstream2 or have other allocations, our training allocation, that's TRA 230023, may be the only one that you see listed. So you can go ahead and select that. I am going to make sure. Anybody has any questions? Whoops. Okay. All right, so before the tutorial, just want to make sure that you can log into Exosphere with your access credentials. I've also linked here, we can drop this in the chat. So we have a getting started guide. If you happen to maybe get lost or kind of get off track, we do have a lot of these steps listed out here on our documentation site. And Caleb, I think this is kind of it for the pre-tutorial stuff. So I'm going to stop sharing so that Caleb can begin sharing, and then I will come back when we are done. So let me stop sharing. Oh, sorry, I have, there we go. Okay, Caleb, it's all you now.
Okay. So are we, do you want to dive right in, or do we want to give people a second?
Let's see. How is everyone doing with regard to logging into Exosphere? If you plan to follow along with the tutorial, is anybody running into any issues? Please raise your hand or speak up in the chat if you gave us your access ID and you are not able to add the allocation in Exosphere. I don't see anything. I think we're good.
I was
Um,
just going to quickly say,
Yeah,
maybe we can utilize the reactions. Like if you need like quick responses, like the thumbs up or thumbs down, maybe that'll help since it's webinar format.
perfect. Seeing a lot of thumbs up. Thumbs up, yes.
okay. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
Yeah. Just a few things real quick. Okay. And then, Jen, I'm assuming the text is a little small on my screen. Um,
It is, yes. If you can zoom
how
in.
is that?
That is better. That is better.
Okay. We can make it.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Okay. Okay. It looks like for the most part, everybody is getting added and is able to access Exosphere. So we'll go ahead and start the interactive portion of this webinar. So my name is Caleb Bright-Hughes. I'm one of the support staff for Jetstream2, and we're just going to go over some of the basic features for Jetstream2 that you can use through the Exosphere interface. And like Jen mentioned, Exosphere is the primary interface that over 90% of our users choose to interact with Jetstream2 through. So if you happen to have lost the link, or you're not sure where to start, and you've got a fresh browser, right, we want to work with Jetstream2. And so we can start here, and we want to get started, right? So this is kind of one of the Jetstream2 official web pages. We click on Get Started here. At this point in the webinar, everyone should have already created an account and requested an allocation. So you've got your access ID, and that should be totally fine. So we want to start using Jetstream2. And what this button is going to do is it's going to pull up the Getting Started tutorial on our documentation site. So just a quick word about the documentation site. This site is built and maintained by myself, Jen, and the other Jetstream2 support team members. We take a lot of care into designing and building the documentation site. We take a lot of user tickets, and we take that feedback and use that to create a documentation site that is most usable and user friendly for our users. So once you are on the documentation site and you want to get started, let's log in to Jetstream2 using Exosphere. So as Jen showed in her preview, we're going to go through the same steps that she showed in her slides. I'm going to add an allocation through Access. Go ahead and log on through, and I'm gonna leave that last field unchanged. This remembers my access ID chughes1 and my password. This is where you would type in that information if you hadn't already. answer my Duo prompt. And I've added to a lot of allocations for troubleshooting issues, but today we're going to use TRA 230023, Jetstream2 education and training. So this should be where everybody is at. So let's go ahead and open that allocation and look at the home page. And by the way, while we're working through this tutorial, if at any point you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand, post a question in the chat. This whole webinar and presentation is for you all and to get you all familiar with Jetstream2. So if you have a question while I'm going over something, there's probably a good chance that you are not the only person with that question. So you will be doing everybody a favor by just raising your hand or posting that question in the chat, and we can address it as a group. So on this homepage, there's a bunch of different information. We'll go over some of it sort of piece by piece. So we see in the allocation usage, we have CPU instance, and it says that we have about 500,000 SUs remaining. So Jenn talked about access credits. That's the sort of monopoly money that you get through access. Once you convert that to Jetstream2 monopoly money, we call them SUs or service units. That's, again, just our sort of funny money that we use to track your usage on the system. So we see that we have about 500,000 left on CPU and 20,000 on GPU. And we've got a few different cards here. We have instances. What's being reported here is that we have 52 instances used of 250 total. So what this tells me is that I have 52 instances launched, and I have a maximum quota of 250 total instances. If I hit that quota, then I will not be able to launch any more instances. I would need to either delete some existing instances, or if you have a use case that requires more instances or a higher quota, you can always open a ticket with the support staff, sort of explain your use case, and we can continue from there. Another note about instances, a reminder, what is an instance? An instance is also known as a virtual machine, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's virtual, it's not a real PC, but what they are collections of CPU cores, RAM, and storage that you combine together to make a virtual computer, a virtual machine that we call instances. Volumes we will talk more about later. Those are one of our most popular storage methods. And we can also see some other things like public IP addresses and other things that we won't cover for the moment. But let's go ahead and click on the Instances tab. Again, we're reminded of some of our quotas on this page. The same quota that we saw for total number of instances used. But we can also see here that we've used up 267 of our cores quota and a terabyte of, or 1,000 gigabytes of our RAM quota. But we don't see any instances. Now this will be the important part for the tutorial. So we've gone ahead and we've created instances for everybody to use during this webinar, but currently I cannot see any. That's because when you click on the instances card in the allocation, by default, it will create this filter that filters out instances by your access username. So right now it's showing all of the instances that were created by chughes1, which is my username, and there's nothing found because I haven't launched any instances. But if you click this red X to clear the filter, this one right here, voila, we can see a ton of different instances. And what everybody should find is that there should be an instance named after their access username. So for instance, mine is chughes1 underscore instance, and that's the one I'm going to be working with. All of the other participants who were able to share their access username ahead of time should find an instance with their name on it. So let's go ahead and click the instance with your name on it and open it up. And I'll give everyone a moment to find their instance. So we got a question. Can you comment on VM versus metal performance? So there is a different team that manages the infrastructure and all of the software that sits in between the VMs and the hardware. Yeah, thank you, Jen.
Yeah, sorry
Um,
about that.
yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, so we would encourage you to review the documentation. There is, most likely a slight performance hit depending on how far abstracted you are from the bare metal. And yeah, the documentation is going to have more specifics about that. I'm getting an error 401.
I've got it.
Okay,
I'll take care of the chat.
thanks, Jen. Yeah. Okay, so hopefully by now everyone has opened up their instance, and at the top you should have opened the instance that has your username underscore instance. So I see my instance name, which is chughes1 underscore instance, which I can rename at a later time if I wanted to. That's how we created these instances with your names on them. We created a bunch of instances and just renamed them. At the top, we have some information. I can see that this was created 2 hours ago, and who made the instance, from what image, right? If I forget what operating system I'm using for this image or which featured image I use, okay, this one's running Ubuntu 24. What flavor the image or the instance is running from. So the flavors are what determine how much hardware your instance is reserving and is able to use. So the M3 Tiny is one of, if not our smallest instances, which is just fine for this tutorial. If I click on the information, I can see an M3 Tiny has 1 CPU core, 3 gigs of RAM, and a 20 gig root disk. So this is comparable to something like a Chromebook, but I can get reminded of the computing power that I have available to me thanks to this flavor. We will see how to choose your flavor at the end of the demo. We'll walk through the steps to actually create an instance and how you can modify those settings later. We can also see our burn rate. As a reminder, SUs are those are your credits, your Monopoly money, your funny money, whatever. And so for an M3 Tiny, because we're not using very much computing power at all, it has a burn rate of just 1 SU per hour. In the next card, resource usage, we can see graphs of our different bits of resources. So our percentage of CPU that we're currently using. So we're using, almost nothing of our 1 core. Our RAM usage, just idling, we're using about 50% of our 3 gigs that are available to us. And our root disk, once we install all of the default software that comes with an instance, we've already used up about 60% of our 20 gig root disk. So that doesn't leave us with much storage on an M3 Tiny, and we'll talk a little bit later about how to use volumes to expand your storage capabilities. Interactions are how you will interface with your instance. So Web Shell and Web Desktop will both open new tabs in your current browser and allow you to interface with your instance through either a terminal or a graphical user interface, and we'll check both of those out momentarily. If you're familiar with using SSH to connect to servers, you have your username and your IP address to connect to the instance, and your passphrase is over here. We'll look at that in a moment. The console you generally will not use. That's really just for advanced use cases. If you've had an error with your instance and you need to recover it in some way, that's when the console becomes useful. But generally, you're going to be using one of these 3 interfaces. In the credentials section, we have a host name and a public IP. Each instance that is created gets assigned its own public IP address and a host name so that the instance can be reached. So if you're serving an app or something that you want you're serving something that you want people to be able to connect to, you have a default host name assigned to your instance. Every instance created through Exosphere comes with a default user called exouser. That's why when you SSH, you're using exouser at the IP address. And each instance has a passphrase that's generated for that instance. So it's a series of random words connected together. So again, if you wanted to SSH to this instance, you could use exouser at that IP address and then copy. There's a convenient copy button to copy the passphrase when you're prompted for the passphrase. We don't have any volumes attached, so we see none in the volumes tab. And here we see the action history. So it was created 2 hours ago and setup was complete. And I have taken no actions since then. And what I mean is actions on the instance as a whole. So I haven't shelved it. I haven't resized it. I haven't done any of that stuff. But if I were to take any actions, they would be logged here. So we have a perfect history of all of the actions that have been taken on the instance. So now that we have kind of idea of all of the information that's being presented to us on this instance page, let's go ahead and open up the web shell, which is going to open up a terminal. There we go. So when you log in to the web shell, you will see all of this information presented to you by default. So some system information about your specific instance. If we have any community messages that we're sharing, we can see our active status items. We have a notice that we have scarce availability of one specific flavor that's particularly popular. It's one of our GPU flavors. And we can see a notice about an upcoming maintenance as a reminder. So on the 14th, we've got maintenance on our LLM inference service, which I will also demo at the end of this tutorial, pending time. So from here, before we start taking actions, I'm going to have a quick pause and see if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask in the chat or otherwise. Okay, seeing none, we will continue. So this is a full terminal. For those of you who are familiar with Linux, you'll be able to run. Is there an issue with so many EXO users? I'm assuming this question is asking about, is there an issue with so many users with the same username? And the answer is no, because each instance is its own unique environment. So unless you are logged on the exact same instance as somebody else, my EXO user is different from your EXO user, is different from every other instance's EXO user, which is unique. Good question. Create singularity apptainer on the compute node. I believe the answer is yes. You can create use apptainer on the compute node, although I have not. So first thing I like to do when I log in is run ls, see what I've got. Okay, I'm in my home directory, and I can see I've got the usual sort of directory structure. One of the things we like to show off is we have some pre-installed software that comes with every single instance that's created, that's managed with something called lmod. So to see what software is available, I can run module available, and it will tell me what I can use. And so here I can see that I've got quite a bit of different software options available to me. I've got R, the statistical software package, very popular. Apptainer, which is already pre-installed. A couple different versions depending on what you need. Intel compiler. Another popular one, we have MATLAB, both the 2024 and 2025 editions available for users. Again, at no cost, it comes pre-installed. MiniForge, which is a Conda alternative for people who want to manage their Python environments, and some other software, including RStudio. One thing that I'm going to adjust really quick, I'm going to adjust my font size, and I will show you how to do this momentarily. There we go. That should make it easier to read. Okay, so let's say I want to use some of that pre-installed software. So first I want to see what software or what modules, I'm going to clear out the terminal. What modules have I already activated? So I'll use module list, and it says no modules loaded because you guys have seen every action I've taken on this instance. You've seen that I haven't actually loaded anything. So let's say I want to load R. So I would just run module load R, and then run module list to confirm that it started properly. And I can see that I have R ready to use. Each instance comes with Python installed. And again, we have MiniForge available if you want a package management software. Another thing to note is that unlike a lot of traditional HPC systems, in Jetstream, in your instance, you have complete sudo and root access. So you are free to do whatever you want to your instance, barring, of course, things like Bitcoin mining and things like that. But you have sudo access, so you can install whatever it is that you need to install. So one such utility that's really useful for examining how much disk space usage you've used up is DUF. And it doesn't come installed by default. Now, if I just run apt install DUF, I'm going to get hit with an error because I don't have the permissions necessary to install that extra package by default. However, because I have sudo access, I can use sudo apt install. And life is good, and it will install that package for me. And now I run DUF. I can see my disk usage on the instance. And again, I was able to do that because I have sudo access on this instance. I can modify my environment however I need, install the packages I need in order to do the research that I need to do, again, which is not very common on a lot of HPC systems. Another feature that I'd like to show off is the one I use to increase the font. So this is the clipboard, and you can bring up this clipboard. If you're on a Windows, you'll press Control-Alt-Shift, and that will bring up the clipboard on your web shell. If you're on a Mac, it's Control-Command-Shift. Again, Windows, that's Control-Alt-Shift. Mac, that's Control-Command-Shift. And so the clipboard is useful for a couple different use cases. So when you're working with a web shell in a terminal, sometimes copying and pasting doesn't work as you would like it to. So with the clipboard open, if I highlight a part of my terminal, the text I highlighted goes straight to my terminal. And in the other direction, if I modify the text in my clipboard, then I can paste it directly in the terminal using right-click. So that's a handy way to handle copy and paste in your instance. Another thing that is useful is this devices option here. So if I click on devices, I can see my file directory structure from root. So if I go to home, and my exo user, which is the default user, I see all of the directories that I saw when I ran the ls command. And if I open documents, I can see it's blank because, of course, this is a fresh instance. I don't have any files in here. But what is really convenient if you have just a few files to upload is the upload files feature. So by clicking this, it will bring up my local storage. And if I have a super important file that I want to upload, I can just click it, hit open, and it will transfer the file to my documents. So This is not a good choice if you have a ton of data that you're trying to move, right? If you have 2,000 small files that you need to move, this tool isn't a great choice for that, for making sure that all of your data gets transferred reliably from your local storage to your instance. But if you just have a few files that you're looking to upload, this is a really convenient way to do that. Hit Control-Alt-Shift. And just to double check, I'm still in my home directory, so if I change directories to my documents and see what's in there, the super important upload file already exists. Okay, so that's all I wanted to show for the web desktop. We've got a question in the chat. Is it possible to change the host name? Mine is showing as exouser at MSCC demo instance batch 5606.
Yeah, it was working on typing an answer to this. exouser is the default user for every instance. And by the way, Francis, the instance that you're looking at, that's just a demo. That's really not one to be using. We do have instances, and Caleb will get to this in a minute. We have instances for everyone in the workshop right now. Host name wise, if you want to use a custom host name, you can adjust DNS records on your own. But those are the defaults for instances.
Thanks, Jen.
Yep.
Okay, so that's all for the web shell. I can just close the web shell now that I'm done with it and return back to the instance homepage. So now we're going to show off the web desktop. Again, the difference being here, the web shell opens up a terminal in your browser, so you just get quick access to a terminal from there. The web desktop is going to open up a graphical environment. So if you're new to Linux or cloud computing, you're used to working on a Windows or a Mac or what have you, this is a great place to start with cloud computing because it's a much more familiar environment for your average PC user. So instances, the web desktop comes pre-installed with Firefox. And again, this Firefox has full internet access. So if you have a software package that you need to download from a browser directly onto your instance, this can be a good way to do that. Or if you just feel like, Googling puppies, again, you have full access to the internet from your instance. We also have RStudio and MATLAB pre-installed, so you can use the GUIs for both of those to conduct your research. You can open a terminal in the web desktop environment and run the same commands and take the same actions that we were doing in the web shell, just inside of the web desktop. We have another file browser here. Again, if I go back to documents, I see that text file that I opened up earlier, because again, I'm accessing the same instance, I'm just doing it through a different interface. And we have other tools installed as well, like calculator, Emacs, system monitor, if you want to check your usage within the instance, so on and so forth. Okay, so now let's go ahead and close the web desktop and talk about the storage problem that we talked about earlier. So again, I have used up a lot of my available 20 gigabytes just installing the operating system and the files that come pre-installed on an instance. And so for my research, I know I'm going to need more than, say, the less than 10 gigabytes of storage that I have available. And this is where volumes come in. So we see a note that the CPU usage is high. Again, that's because we just have one core. But in the graph, you can see these spikes where, we were installing software and opening web desktop and doing things like that. And you can see that in the history of your usage here. But again, I want to expand my storage. and volumes are the way to do that. So I'm going to click on Create in the top right-hand corner. And I've already got an instance, so let's create a volume. So I'm going to name it. I'm going to just name mine C-Hughes1 demo, and feel free to create your own volume as we're with your own username as we're working along. And I'm just going to leave the size as the default 10 gigabytes. I can create a volume that's as large as my remaining storage quota if I would like, or any size in between. I'm just going to create a 10 gigabyte volume. And there we go. Now here's an old volume that I created earlier. I created that one 2 hours ago. The one I just created, C-Hughes1 demo, is right here. So what are volumes? You can think of volumes as a virtual flash drive, right? In that it is a storage device that you can attach to one instance at a time. When you attach it to an instance, you can see whatever is on that storage, on that virtual flash drive, but you can't see it from an instance that it's not attached to. When you detach the volume, when you detach the volume from your instance, the files stay associated with the volume. They stay on the volume so that you can attach that volume to another instance if you wanted to. So if you and one of your students or one of your collaborators both have an instance on your allocation, and I do a bunch of work and I save it all to my volume, and you want to take a look at that, but you don't want, or you need to use that, but you don't want to use my instance, then I can just detach the volume from my instance and you can attach it to your instance and have access to all of those files. So let's practice attaching a volume. Let's go ahead and hit the attach button here. And that's going to bring up another menu, and select the instance with your name, the instance that you've been working from. So since I've been working from C-Hughes1 instance, I'm going to click that one. You, of course, will click the instance that has your access username underscore instance. We got a question that I would like to address. Can one volume be attached to multiple instances? No. So there are different storage options if you need multiple instances to have access to the exact same storage location. We do have options for that, but by default, a volume can only be attached to one instance at a time.
But you can have multiple volumes attached to one instance at a time.
Correct, correct. Just like you can have multiple flash drives attached to a single computer, you can have multiple volumes attached if you would like. But you cannot have one flash drive attached to two computers at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and click attach. And it lets me know the volume was attached. The important, maybe the most important piece of info here is the mount point. Whenever you attach a volume, it is all in Exosphere. It's always by default going to land at media/volume/your volume name. So mine will be at media volume C-Hughes1 demo. So I'm going to go back to my instance. And I can see that the root disk plot here still shows 20 total gigabytes. Again, that's because the volume is an external storage. It has nothing to do with the root disk created when the instance was created. It is an external storage system that is available to me. But if I go down to volumes, I can see that it's attached, the name of the volume and where I can find it. So I'm going back, here's my instance. So I'm going to open up the web desktop again. And I'm going to see if I can find it. So one way I can do that is from the terminal. So I remember it's at media/volume, but maybe I don't remember the name of it. So I'm going to use ls, aha, my volume's name is chughes1 demo, and I can find it from my home directory. If I go in there, there's nothing, there are no files or anything because this is a fresh volume. I haven't installed anything. But if I create a dummy file, let's just call it example.txt. Now if I check, I can see I've got an empty example file in there. You can also examine the contents of your volume, again, from that file browser that we have installed. So to find the volume here, you're going to click on Other Locations at the bottom. And then we can see the volume attached. It provides us a nice little shortcut here. I can see how much storage I have available. I have a little over 10 gigs of my total 10.5 available. If I click on it, then I can see that example file that we just created. So this is just to show that these do both show the same file system. Okay, back to the instance page. I'm going to close the web desktop. Okay. Let's see here. Yeah, so again, you can always SSH to your instance if you prefer to access your instance from a terminal on your machine. I think that covers the majority of the actions we want to take. So now, what do we do if we've done our research and we know that we are done for the day? We're not running any other software, but as a reminder, again, I'm still burning SUs. Again, that's because with Jetstream2, you are charged for the time that you are reserving these resources and not how intensely you use them. So I'm going to burn 1 SU per hour with this instance, whether I'm maxing out the CPU cores or if I'm leaving it idle. And for some of our more capable flavors, the burn rate is a bit higher, and you want to make sure that you're shelving it when you're not using it, both so that you are not charged SUs for an instance that you're not actively using, but it also frees up those instances for the community to use. So let's practice shelving now that we're done with the active part of the demo. So we're going to hit Actions, and we're going to see this menu pop up for a bunch of different things that we can do with our instance. Reboot and delete are sort of self-explanatory, but the one that we want to focus on right now is shelve. So it's going to shut down our instance and offload it from compute host. Again, what that means is that our instance is going to shut down, so we won't be able to SSH into it, or we won't be able to access it immediately, but we're not deleting it. Essentially, what we're doing is kind of putting it to sleep, and then we can bring it back online again when we need to use it. And it offloads it from the compute host. So what that means is the CPU core, the RAM that I had reserved for this specific instance when it was created is now going to be freed up because my instance is shelved, it's not active, it's not actively using those resources, so they go back into the pool. When I'm ready to use my instance again, I can unshelve, and then what will happen is when I unshelve, it tells the system, okay, I'm going to grab a CPU core, I'm going to grab the RAM I need for this system, my instance will boot right back up, and all my files will still be there. I can pick up right where I left off, but I wasn't charged in between when I went to bed and when I woke up. And we had a question in the chat. Yes, shelving doesn't just drop the burn rate, it reduces it to 0. So there are some options that don't necessarily drop it down to 0, but shelving is your only surefire way to make sure that you are not being charged any SUs for your instance, and is your best chance to preserve your SUs. So let's all go ahead and shelve our instances. It's going to give us a little notice that, hey, your public IP address is going to be released and will no longer be associated with this instance. For 99% of people, that's fine, unless you're using so you're serving some sort of gateway or service where you need to hang on to your IP address. What will happen is this IP address will go back into the pool and become available. But when you relaunch your instance, you'll be assigned a fresh IP address, and you'll be able to carry on as you were. So am I sure I want to shelve? Yes. And so we see that that green ready label went from ready to shelving. So that lets me know it's in the process of shelving and freeing up those resources. I can no longer access the web shell or the web desktop. The public IP address has been released and it's gonna become shelved. The volume is going to remain attached because I didn't detach the volume. And if I go back to instances, and again, because I didn't create this instance, I can't see it, but I can clear, and I can see now that my instance is shelved. So I'm no longer going to be charged SUs for that instance. One thing that we should cover, so I've got my Hughes1 instance. Let's say I'm using that for one specific analysis, but I have a separate analysis that I want to do that requires a totally different environment, totally different set of packages. And so what I can do is I can launch a new instance. You don't need to follow this step, but in order to launch an instance, what you'll do is hit create, and we're going to create an instance. When you do that, it's going to ask you which type of Linux you would like to use. And again, just like you have different operating systems for your standard PCs, you've got Windows, you've got Mac, you've got different types of Linux flavors available. If you're new to Linux, Ubuntu is very user-friendly, so I would recommend using that one. And then we get to the second part of the instance creation screen. So when you name your instance, you want to give it a name that tells you what you were kind of using it for. So I'm going to call mine Hughes1 Workflow 2. And here is the flavor selector. So this is where you will pick the flavor that matches your research needs. So again, we were all working on an M3 Tiny with 1 CPU core, 3 gigs of RAM, 20 gigs of root disk. But let's suppose that my new workflow needs to use a GPU. Well, I can select one of the GPU flavors, which all start with G, and complete that workflow. So I can select a G3 Medium, which has 8 CPUs and 30 gigs of RAM, but also access to an NVIDIA A100, or part of an NVIDIA A100 GPU. Now, the question might be, well, why wouldn't I just max out and pick like the G3 XL, right? It's got more cores, more RAM, so on and so forth. The more powerful flavor that you select here, the more SUs you're going to burn for that flavor. So when you're creating an instance, you want to select an instance that has enough compute power to accomplish your needs, but doesn't have an excess of compute power so that you're being charged extra SUs when you don't need all of that power. The next thing you'll choose is a root disk size. So for most of the flavors, except for the 3 smallest flavors, the default root disk size is 60 gigabytes instead of 20 gigabytes. I would recommend leaving that at the default size unless you have a strong use case for expanding the root disk size. Needing extra storage is not a good reason to expand your root disk size, because if you need extra storage, you can always use a volume. If you expand your root disk size by using a custom disk size, there are some drawbacks, including the storage is going to be counted against your quota. Whereas if you leave it at the default, this 60 gigabytes will not be charged against my storage quota. And if you need to take actions on your instance, like if you need to recover some data and it's shelved and won't unshelve, or you need to move it to a new allocation, further down the road, those actions become a little more complicated if you use a custom disk size and create a volume-backed instance. So we strongly recommend, if your needs are just storage-based and you don't need the storage in your root disk, to just leave this at the default and use volumes as much as possible. How many instances? So let's say that I'm creating instances for a class or for a workshop, and I don't want to launch 30 instances one at a time. This slider lets me select multiple instances at a time, right? For example, I could launch 20 instances all at once with these settings so that I don't have to launch my instances one at a time. But I only need the one. Enable web desktop. I like to always enable the web desktop. It's a handy feature to have. If you don't enable it when you launch your instance, I'm not sure that you will be able to get access to it later. And it doesn't hurt anything to have it enabled, but not everybody needs it. So you do have the option here. And then we won't discuss the advanced options in this tutorial. But once you've made all of those selections, you just hit create. And then now my instance is building. And now when I click on instances, because I launched this one, I can see this one without clearing the filter. I see this G3 medium created just now by my username. I can click on it. I can't access it because it's building. And this will take a few minutes to complete building. But after a few minutes, I'll have a fresh instance up and running from scratch that you can use just like we had discussed earlier. So a couple more things to show, and then our getting started tutorial will be done. If you, so again, the documentation page is great. Highly recommend checking it out. Special topics. We also offer, and this is a new feature, so we're still building it out, and LLM inference service. So if you have an access ID from our documentation, you can access a few different LLMs using your access ID. So I'm just going to continue with access single sign-on. And from here, I can use the LLMs that Jetstream2 provides. Currently, we provide GPT OSS and Llama 4 Scout, and all I needed was my access ID, and I can use these LLMs totally free of charge. We are working on expanding the models that are offered, so keep an eye on that space and stay tuned. With that, that is everything that I had. Any questions? Okay, I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Carl had asked about it. Carl got the, thank you for bringing that up, Carl. That exceeded maximum number of retries error. I think we were seeing that like last week, maybe.
Oh,
It's okay. Okay, so, and then someone asked, should we delete the instance that we created? I'm going to share my screen again and
yeah, I figure out.
and come back. Okay, so I'm back. So if you were added to our training allocation, Caleb, can you take chat while I finish up these little slides here?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So you're in our training allocation right now. I did say on the slide you can stay there to the end of tomorrow, but I think we can leave you in there through the end of the week. So end of Friday, and then we will take everyone out of the training allocation just to give you a couple of days to kind of play around. You can either keep using the test instance that we created for you, or you can try launching your own. We would just ask that you not launch several instances, or leave anything running. So practicing that shelving and unshelving that we talked about. Upcoming events. So we have another Jetstream2 webinar. This one will be specifically focused on teaching AI or and that really is the focus, teaching AI in the classroom. And that will be our colleague Danny is going to be running that webinar, and that will be on, I believe, July 8th, same time, Jessica, 2 to 3.
Yes, yes.
Okay, yes. So if that applies to you, the registration is not live for that one yet, right? We wanted to ask some specific questions in that, yes?
Yes, we do have
Okay.
a link to like registrants if folks wanted to just kind of put their name on there, but we can actually pause that then and
Okay.
wait.
Yeah, okay. So there will be registration for that, but that is our next webinar will be July 8th. And then if you happen to be going to the PERT conference in Minneapolis at the end of July, our team will be there just attending the conference, but then we're also doing a tutorial. Someone from our team is doing a tutorial on Kubernetes clusters with Magnum. If that is a very specific use case, but if that's something that you are working in, that we will be at Perk for that, or just to talk about Jetstream 2. And then we mentioned that we have office hours every Tuesday. I don't know if Wayne is still here, but Wayne is like our number one fan of Jetstream 2 office hours. And that's every Tuesday. It's just drop in. It's very casual. It's from 2 to 3 Eastern time, just a Zoom drop in. And you can have a specific question, or if you just kind of want to hear what other people are working on. It's again very casual. And all sorts of questions get asked during office hours. And then there are several different ways of connecting with us, but these are the two best ways. So when you have a project on Jetstream 2, you automatically get subscribed to our mailing list. And we use that typically for maintenance announcements, communications, things like that. And then our support email, help@jetstream-cloud.org, goes to a sort of ticketing queue that we all access and take tickets as needed. So you can always reach us there. And then just some kind of wrap up information. This is our team. Caleb and I, our contact information is right here. You can always go to our website, open a support ticket, reach us however you need to. But yeah, that's what we've got for today. I know we're like right at time, so I don't know if there are any other questions that we have time for if we have like a hard stop at 3:30. But if you've got something that you wanted to discuss, you can always drop into office hours next Tuesday, or just reach out to us through our support queue, and yeah, we'll be happy to talk further or answer questions. I think we all feel fairly passionate about this project and this resource, so we're always pretty happy to talk about it. Any other
Thank you both. We don't necessarily have a hard stop, but I just wanted to say before everyone left, thank you both, Caleb and Jen, so much for a wonderful presentation. We greatly appreciate it. And again, as Jen mentioned, there's an upcoming webinar on July 8th, a part two kind of to this series. So looking forward to seeing you all there again. But we can stay on for a few minutes. I'll stop the recording if there happens to be
Okay.
folks who might have some questions.